Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess, and I have been MIA. This is slightly on purpose. I realized the last episode, for anyone who is listening, I didn't really give a warning that there'd be a little holiday break, but I did take a break over the Thanksgiving holiday, and then it just kind of kept going. I had final exams at Parker University, and I was just working really hard to cement my efforts for that trimester. And thankfully, so today is December 13th of 2024, and I was able to close out. I got essentially a 3.0 GPA in the program overall this thus far, and I'm a year in. So at this point, I got about 2 years left, and last night was a great night. I finished my last exam Wednesday, so a day later, a friend of mine came into town for business, and also another friend of mine here in town hosted us for dinner. So we had dinner, and the wine started flowing, and the celebration happened, celebrating obviously my achievement, and then also cool things going on in their lives as well. And it was just one of those nights where you met people for a specific purpose, and again, the wine got flowing, the conversation got flowing, and I think if you've been listening to the podcast in 2024, you can understand that this year was a process for me. It's me, I think, for the first time in my life, being willing to fail a little bit, being willing to, just try things and see if it works. Be curious. I think I oftentimes don't let myself be openly curious. So it's been really tough, because obviously you take some L's, and if you're like me, if you're a perfectionist, it doesn't feel very good, and you're not used to feeling those feelings. Usually you do everything you can to avoid failure, and if you do happen to fail, you just stuff that shit down and never speak of it again. So speaking from experience, it was very liberating in 2024. That goes, honestly, just to kind of reiterate, but that goes for my schoolwork as well. Again, I have a 3.0. I think the old me would have pushed for a 4, or a high 3 point. And to be honest, I feel like I learned all the information I need to learn. And when it came to the test, it was just aspects of the test that were difficult, or that I wasn't prepared for, that were challenging, and still able to get high B's, like an 85 to 88% in the class. And that for me used to be unacceptable. And so now the fact that I can not only accept that but celebrate it, I think is a huge sign of growth, which I'm proud of. So just giving myself a little bit of props here. But that's kind of what this episode is about. So I promise I'm not just pumping myself up for no reason. In my time between studying, I like to just, pick up little fun habits here or there, do 30 minutes of something that I like to do, either before bed or kind of in the middle of studying. And I got pretty good habit going. And my kind of vice of choice this round of finals was a specific Winston Churchill documentary, among other things. But I got rather obsessed with Winston Churchill, and it's based on one story in particular, and I'm going to probably butcher the details here. But if you watch, there is a documentary on Netflix. It's newer as of right now, end of 2024. But one of the episodes tells a story of Winston Churchill when he was kind of down and out of Parliament, and people viewed him as kind of a nut job. He was obviously not working in his desired field and kind of took a bit of a sabbatical. So he goes to Germany just by happenstance. It's like you could go anywhere in Europe, or in the world rather, and he happens to go to Germany. Well, this is during the time of an election where Hitler was seeking election. And I find it just so timely because Winston Churchill is poking around Germany, and everyone's like, oh, well, he's not in the British government anymore, so who cares? We don't need to impress this guy or whatever. So Winston, kind of under the conditions of anonymity, ends up, socializing and getting around town and seeing different people and places and things. And at one point, he gets invited to a dinner party where Hitler is supposed to attend. It's during the election, so he's very busy. So he ends up standing them up. And from a roundabout way, the way the story was told, it kind of inflamed Winston Churchill's ego. And if you don't know anything about him, obviously a lot of great men also have, they might have great virtues, but they also typically have massive egos because they're striving for great heights. So you would hope that the ego and the virtues are balanced, and I think that changes. Like, people are a process. So as you're, going through life, I'm sure it ebbs and flows, but at this point, Winston was like, hey, this guy has stood me up. Like, what's with this guy? So he kind of has like a personal vendetta against Hitler before Hitler's really done anything. He hasn't really risen to power yet. So obviously time goes by. They kind of have a little bit of a rivalry, and then things start to happen. Hitler's elected, the Third Reich rises up, and everyone in Europe's kind of like, hey, this guy's like kind of a whack job, but like he hasn't really done anything yet that we can go get him for, but like he seems sketchy, but we'll just leave it. And he starts to conquer countries. He starts like taking power in Europe. And because the UK is on its kind of own island across the English Channel from France, they feel a little bit safe, I guess. I don't know. But that wouldn't make me feel very safe. And I think because Winston Churchill got stood up by Hitler at dinner, he had this personal, kind of unhealthy personal vendetta, which, Hitler probably didn't mean anything by not going to dinner. He just actually had an election to win, and he's a nut job. But Winston looked into him and realizes, wait, no, this is deeper than my ego. And his like virtues were triggered of like, no, this person is doing terrible things. If we let him run wild, this is genocide. This is war crimes. This is awful, awful stuff. So he goes back to Parliament and basically says, hey guys, we got to stop this guy. Like now, we got to kill the baby in the crib because this is going to get out of control. And everyone kind of called him crazy. Called him a warmonger, and he kind of had that reputation of being brash, so it was a little bit like Boy Who Cried Wolf. And I think just the true nature of the issue, that like Hitler wasn't going away and he will try to conquer us, at this point Winston had no choice but to keep getting back up on his soapbox and delivering that message, even though it was being met with, intense criticism. So eventually, if you know anything about Winston Churchill, Hitler takes over most of Europe and starts bombing London. And essentially, at a certain point, the people realize, oh shit, Winston's right. He's been right about this all along. And there was an election, they voted him prime minister. And then as prime minister, he skillfully got FDR to get into World War II. And ultimately, it was the United States who kind of turned the tide. Without the United States, the Allies were pretty much toast. Most of the countries had been invaded, and the UK was really the only thing standing between democracy in Europe and Hitler. So he skillfully got FDR on his side, and they all worked together, and they defeated the Nazis. So I'm saying all that to say Churchill's example like really inspired me, and I think it's easy to kind of know what's right. I think when we're born, I think we all kind of know like the original like human instincts. If you follow your heart and you use your mind appropriately to assess new threats, I think the instincts are generally pretty good for most people. So it's really like trauma and different things that happens to us that changes those instincts, modifies them in unhealthy ways, like these adaptation or maladaptations. And I just admired the fact that like Winston Churchill had every reason to kind of stick with like a maladaptation. But somehow he stuck with the virtues and doubled down, even though he was being intensely criticized. And it kind of goes against human instinct. Like, you don't want to be humiliated. You don't want to be ostracized. You don't want to stand out from the crowd. But yeah, for whatever reason, he did that and stuck to his guns and was able to, quite frankly, save the UK. I mean, he couldn't save everyone, and London was bombed heavily, but just being able to escape that with your life and the lives of, hundreds of thousands of Brits was incredible. So I kind of distilled the wisdom down to one word, really, and he always did this symbol. It was like a peace sign, but really it was a V, and he was saying V for victory. And I believe that victory is only achievable when one specific condition is satisfied before everything else. Like, before you even start the fight. There's a lot of like books like The Art of War that talk about like your preparation before you even start the fight is like more important than the actual fight itself. So there's a Churchill quote that says, "It's not enough that we do our best. Sometimes we must do what is required." So to break that down a little bit, I think I've spoken about it before on the podcast, but I initially think of the Four Agreements, which I really love, still to this day. But there's a bit of a contradiction. So one of the agreements is always do your best. And like, your best may not be as good on a specific day. And I think the beauty of humans is that you can do your best, and you can say, oh, that was my best. I did my best, and you can kind of rest on your laurels, maybe not slide backwards, but you're going to stay the same. There's a little piece of like mediocrity to that, which I think I was allowing myself to subscribe to. I think it's useful to know, like, for example, in the gym, if you didn't sleep well, it's probably not wise to go try to PR, a lift, like a heavy lift with weights and everything, because the weights could injure you. Your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, they're potentially fragile from a lack of sleep. So that day is not the day to bark up the tree. But I think when you look at a situation in reverse order, I also think of the old song, I ain't as good as I once was, but I'm good once as I ever was. And I think Winston Churchill, in a way, as a younger man, maybe a sharper mind, maybe he would have navigated the situation with more grace early on, and then he would have had social capital to, talk about Hitler sooner. But when it really counted, he was as good once as he ever was. Like, he stood up right when he needed to ultimately keep it from going too far. So I don't think that it's something we can do all the time. Like, it's not enough that we do our best. Sometimes we must do as required. Sometimes what's required requires more energy and more effort than you actually are physically capable of. But somehow again and again throughout history, you look at people that we consider heroes, they did impossible things, things that were seemingly impossible. And all because they were just doing what was required. You know, there wasn't any victim mentality. There wasn't any, oh, I don't feel good, I can't show up today. Like, there's going to be that day where you just can't do it and you just have to do it anyways. And I don't think that can be every day. I don't think that's healthy or sustainable. But I have talked about in the podcast before, there are maybe 4 or 5 moments in your life where you got to step up. And that moment, although you don't realize it, you're going to look back and realize that was the pivot point. That was the hinge. That was the fulcrum. And I'm so glad I did that. So these are just thoughts kind of on my mind post Winston Churchill documentary. And I want to leave on just a commitment that I made to myself. So this winter break, from 2 days ago until January 6th, I actually deleted Instagram. And when I think about Instagram, Instagram is a lot of things to a lot of people. What I think it was to me was a place where I was seeking validation in not necessarily, I guess, all types of validation, but specifically would post things out of self-pity, and then I think people would like it and respond it because they feel the same way in some cases. And we're all looking for, it's like confirmation bias. We're all looking for things that confirm our worldviews. And again, this wasn't all the time, but when I think about it, the unhealthy aspect, remember, like, there's virtues and then there's our ego. And if that can be balanced, I think we can live a good life. But it's really easy with technology to spiral out of control, let the ego flare, or let your virtue fall. And so for me, I just made a commitment to myself to not use Instagram again until January. School starts up again on the 6th, and I get a lot of information from school. I keep in touch with classmates, keep in touch with friends. Like, there's a lot of really useful things about Instagram, and I'll be doing them again in January. So that for me is something that is required. And part of the reason that I understood that was, if you have ever been on my Instagram and paid attention, if you pay attention to what people write on their profiles, which I know most people don't, some people do, but I had a quote in that notes section that said, giving anything less than your best is sacrificing the gift. And I think I used to buy into that phrase because I do feel like we all have gifts in life. We have different things that we need to give to our communities. And doing anything less than your best is sacrificing that gift for sure. But also, sometimes not doing what's required is also sacrificing the gift. Like, taking it a step further. Once again, not all the time. But if you get that chill in your spine and you feel the call from whatever you want to call it, God, the universe, however you do religion or spirituality, and it's calling you to do something and you don't do it, you are sacrificing the gift, which is, to me, the gift of life and your gifts. So your, whatever your skills are, whatever, you're here to do. So, tying that all together, I'm going to be changing, when I do get back on Instagram, I'm going to be changing my profile quote so that people see it. And I hope, again, like, if someone visits my profile and sees it and is inspired, maybe I'll even put a link to this episode specifically so they kind of know what we're talking about. If you are listening to this episode from that, I'm literally like time traveling right now, speaking to you in the future. Kind of funny, kind of meta. Hello from the past. I'm here to tell you, don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. Please do it. That's actually what I'm going to leave everything on. So last little bit I wrote down here. Again, if you're being called to do something, not from a place of like need or want or fear, those things are pretty easy to suss out, and it's because that attention that you're giving whatever it is not coming from your heart center. Like, it's not coming from your heart, it's coming from like a body need. It's coming from a lower vibrational state. So it is possible to do things that are typically low vibration from your heart, and I can tell you those experiences are way better if you do that. Like, imagine like doing something kind for someone, but you're really trying to make yourself feel superior. Like, maybe it's a homeless person and you give them money, but it's like to remind them that you're better than them. Again, these are like super subtle subconscious things, but it's things that I know happen. Like, there's that motivation. There's also, I'm going to give this homeless person like money. To be honest too, my newer formed opinion is giving money to a homeless person without them having to work for it in some shape or form. Like, even if someone just strikes me as super kind, like, I'll help them out with something. Maybe not money directly, but like, hey dude, it's a hot day, you need some water, like you need a bottle of water, like whatever. And like, if that person is like working on themselves and healing and they really are thirsty, like they're gonna appreciate that water like it was a stack of cash. So it's really the intention that you do things with. And again, like, intentions can be conscious or unconscious or subconscious. And a lot of us, because of emotional pain or other, things, are walking around the world in our subconscious or unconscious minds. And that's where things can get a little bit messy. You have to bring these things into the conscious so that you can sort them out and act, with balanced ego and virtue. And so there's examples in life of just operating from a higher, I hate to say higher vibration because that just sounds woo-woo, but if you can operate from your heart and bring yourself back to that in every single moment, even when you feel yourself drift. I mean, this is literally like living meditation. You feel your mind drift, you feel your heart drift, pull it back and do what is required. So with that, I leave you today. I will be back again next week. I'm looking forward to getting on a normal cadence again. Recording typically Thursdays and posting Fridays will be my schedule that I try to adhere to for now until something changes. And I'll say before I go, I appreciate you for listening. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever time it is, whatever year it is, I hope you have a great rest of your day. And if things aren't going your way, just make the next best move. And if you're avoiding something hard, I promise you, just do it. Do what's required. And you're going to get through it. All right, y'all. Until next time, this is Blaine out.